You may be seated. Welcome back, everybody. I was only delayed because the attorneys were showing me the video to make sure that I've reviewed the same copy that's going to be played today here in court. I think that my ruling was clear earlier that I'm not closing court, so that means that you can take video of the video and broadcast it. I'm just not releasing it as discovery yet. I'm not releasing it to the general public in disc or recorded form, but anything that happens in this courtroom, this court is open to the public, can be shown on TV or written about in the papers, or photographs can be taken. So just hopefully I've been clear on that. All right, great. Now, defense, you've called your last. Mr. Garcia, you may inquire.
Thank you, Your Honor. May it please the court, Mr. Escobar, Mr. Michaels. Mr. Cummings, good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
If you would, please, can you state your full legal name and spell your last name for the court reporter, please?
Yes, Charles James Cummings. INGS.
And, sir, what is your profession?
I am a sales manager with Humana.
I'm sorry?
I'm a sales manager with Humana.
And how long have you been employed by Humana?
20 years.
Mr. Cummings, directing your attention back to January 13th of 2014, do you recall that date?
Yes, I do.
Did you attend the Cobb movie theater on that date?
Yes, I did.
And did you attend the movie with your son?
Yes, I did.
And what's your son's name?
Alexander Cummings.
Okay. And does the date, January 13th of 2014, have any special meaning to you?
Yes, it does. It's my birthday. It was my 68th birthday.
Okay. Did you have occasion to go to the Cobb movie theater with your son to watch the film Lone Survivor?
Yes.
What time did you arrive at the movie theater?
Approximately 1:23, 1:24, 1:25.
Okay. Sometime within that time frame?
Correct.
And if you would, please, can you share with the court where you sat in the movie theater?
We sat in the same aisle as the victim who was eventually shot.
Okay, which would be Mr. and Mrs. Olson,
Olson?
the same aisle?
Yes, we were about three seats away from where Olson was sitting.
Okay. Were you closer to Mrs. Olson, or were you closer to...
Mr. Olson.
So you would have been closer to Mr. Olson?
Yes.
Were you to his right or to his left?
I was to his right.
And there's a person who later became known to you as Curtis Reeves. Where was Mr. Reeves in the movie theater?
He was sitting behind Mr. Olson,
Okay.
directly behind him. That was the last row of the normal seating before the seats move up to the bistro section.
Okay. When you arrived in the movie theater, were Mr. and Mrs. Olson already sitting?
Yes, they were.
And how about Mr. and Mrs. Reeves? Were they likewise already sitting?
Yes, they were.
Okay. I take it you sat down
Yes.
with your son.
Yes.
What were the lighting conditions in the movie theater?
I think about half the lights were on.
Could you see?
Yes.
Did you have any difficulty in seeing?
No.
Was the theater showing previews, and what time did the previews actually start?
We think the preview started at 1:20. Since we got there a little bit later, they were into a preview, and then we got to see the second preview and part of the third. So that's what we saw on the theater screen.
All right. While you're watching the previews, is your attention drawn to anything?
Yes, it was.
And can you tell the court what your attention was drawn to?
It was drawn to some conversations that were going on between Mr. Olson and Mr. Reeves.
Could you hear the conversations?
I couldn't hear what Mr. Reeves was saying. I did hear Mr. Olson say to Mr. Reeves, I'm just texting my 2-year-old daughter.
Okay. Did you hear any other conversations between Mr. Reeves and Mr. Olson?
No, I did not. Immediately after that, I did not hear what they were saying.
Was there further confrontation, or I don't want to say confrontation. What would you call it? Were they talking to one another still, or?
It seemed like it seemed to me like there was some
Objection, Your Honor, improper predicate if he's going to get into speculation. It seemed to him. He either knows it or he doesn't.
Response, Mr. Gerstein? Actually, just sustain, rephrase the question.
Mr. Cummings, what you're testifying to is your own personal knowledge, correct?
Correct.
It's your own personal
Objection,
observations.
Your Honor, he's leading this witness.
Overruled, to get to the point. I understand that it is his observations.
Okay. Did you observe Mr. Olson and Mr. Reeves engaging in conversations?
Yes, it was a conversation between those two.
Okay. Did Mr. Reeves appear to be angry or agitated during this conversation?
Yes, he did.
And would you tell us why you're coming to that conclusion or that opinion?
Because he stood up, he walked past the back of my seat and my son's seat, seeming very agitated, talking to himself, kind of like he was grumbling about something, and I couldn't hear his words. He stumbled a little bit. His knee hit the back of my seat. His leg hit the back of my head a little bit. It was a little annoying. He got to the steps and went down the steps.
Okay. How long was he gone?
It seemed like a couple of minutes. I wasn't paying attention to him after he went down the steps. I tried to look at the preview. I wanted to go back to the preview and see what was playing.
All right. Did you see Mr. Reeves re-enter the theater?
He re-entered the Reeves. Yes, he entered the theater a short time later. As he passed us again, going back to his original seat, he still was mumbling under his breath. He seemed like a very agitated guy about something.
All right. As you're sitting there watching the previews, is there another confrontation between Mr. Reeves and Mr. Olson?
Yes, there was some dialogue between those gentlemen, and I think that's the time when Mr. Olson stood up, turned around, and started talking to him. And his voice was much higher when he was talking to him.
Could you hear what Mr. Olson was saying?
He said something to the effect of, a theater manager, did you tell the theater manager about us? Or did you report the theater manager? I'm not quite sure exactly what he said, but it was something along those lines.
Did you hear a response from Mr. Reeves?
No.
Did you see popcorn being thrown or popcorn going into the air?
I saw popcorn going into the air, but I cannot tell you who threw the popcorn.
Okay. Did you at any time see Mr. Olson strike Mr. Reeves?
I did not.
Did you at any time see Mr. Olson punch Mr. Reeves?
I did not.
Did you at any time see Mr. Olson strike Mr. Reeves with a cell phone or any other type of object?
I did not.
Did you ever see Mr. Olson approach Mr. Reeves in a threatening manner?
I saw his voice raised, but not in a threatening manner, and I did not hear any curse words.
Did you ever see Mr. Olson reaching over his seat trying to get at either Mr. Reeves or in his space?
I did not.
After the popcorn is thrown, what happens?
Objection, Your Honor, it's a statement not in evidence as to the popcorn is thrown. He didn't say that. He said he just saw popcorn flying.
Okay.
I'll rephrase it.
After the popcorn flew, what happened?
After the popcorn flew, what happened?
It seemed like a very, very short time after that, there was a bright flash and a gun went off. A very loud gunshot went off.
All right. Could you see Mr. Reeves when the gun went off?
No, I just saw the flash.
Did Mr. Reeves say anything after the gun went off?
He said something about 30, 40 seconds later, or maybe it was less than that. He said something, like, throw something in my face.
Did you hear any statements from Mr. Olson?
I did hear some statements from Mr. Olson. As his wife passed by, my son and I first, she was extremely upset, crying, a little bit of screaming. As Olson started to go past us, as he reached my left shoulder, he said, "I can't believe he shot me." He took another step and a half, and then he collapsed on my son.
And you, correct?
Yes, and I grabbed him from I grabbed his torso from my son, and we set him on the ground.
Did individuals then subsequently start performing CPR on him?
Yes.
Did you have an opportunity to view a videotape of the Cobb movie theater's from January 13th of 2014?
Yes, I did.
Based upon your observations, is that a true and accurate depiction of the events that occurred on January 13th of 2014 in the movie theater?
Yes, it was.
May I have a moment, Judge?
You may.
Mr. Cummings, did you expect this incident to rise to the level that it did?
Objection, Your Honor, relevancy.
Sustained. Sustained. The way it's phrased, sustained.
The initial confrontation or conversation between the two gentlemen, did you feel a need to intervene and say, listen, guys, just calm down, so on and so forth?
Not at that point. I was getting ready. A thought passed my mind to potentially say something, but I didn't have the opportunity to do.
All right.
Because we were still into the previews. I thought it may have been worked out by the time the main feature came on.
Did you think that someone was just going to get up and move?
Objection, Your Honor, speculative.
Sustained.
In your opinion, did you believe someone was going to get up and move?
Same objection.
Sustained.
Judge, I think you can allow to give an
I
opinion as to,
appreciate that. Sustained.
based upon your observations, do you have an opinion as to one of them may or may not have moved?
Same objection, Your Honor.
This is based.
Sustained. I heard you, but it's still sustained. Do you have any other questions?
Yes, sir. No. I don't have any further questions of Mr. Cummings, Judge.
Okay. Mr. Escobar, do you have any questions?
I do, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Mr. Cummings.
Okay.
Mr. Cummings, you had gone to the Cobb Theater with your son, is that correct?
Yes.
How old's your son?
He's 35 now. He was 34 when we went to the Cobb Theater.
Okay, and that was a early day movie, is that correct? You got there about one something you indicated, 1:20, 1:22?
123. The previews had already started.
Okay, where had you come from?
We came from my home.
Okay. And so when you came into that theater, the lights had already been dimmed,
Sure.
correct? Because the theater trailers were just on their way, correct?
Yes.
And so there was noise in the theater, correct?
Some noise, yes.
From the trailers that were being
Trailers.
shown? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And when these trailers are shown, that noise is generally louder than the movie itself.
Could be.
And so you walked over to a seat. You're saying somewhere between 3 and 4 seats away from Mr. Olson.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
And so if I was seated in your position here, Mr. Olson would be either to your right or to your left?
He was to my left.
He was to your left. Okay. Now, 3 to 4 seats to your left. Now, those seats at the Cobb Theater are nice and wide, aren't they?
Yes.
Kind of comfy, correct? In fact, the backs to those particular seats actually recline.
They do.
And they almost even rock, correct?
They may.
And so when that back of the chair reclines, the back actually goes into the walkway in front of row A. Correct?
Good. Mm-hmm.
Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay, and so the theater as it's depicted there has a wall, correct? It has a cinebistro actually on top of that wall, correct?
Yes.
And that wall is a 6-foot wall.
Or it's a big cement wall. I don't know how tall it is.
Okay, and so right next to that wall that separates the cinebistro from the general area is row A. So row A's back is right towards that wall, correct?
I guess. Mm-hmm.
You're seated in row A, you can touch the wall right here. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
And so the only way to get out of row A is not going back because the wall doesn't let you, correct?
I guess.
You're guessing?
I don't know what that back wall looks like. I just know it's there.
Okay.
I've never sat in that seat. The furthest I ever sat back was the row that I sat in for that movie.
Which is B, the next row down.
The next row down. Mhm.
Okay, and so if you're seated here in row A, the wall's behind you, the only way to get out of that row is to your right or to your left.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Correct.
How many rows in from the aisle were you?
Rows or chairs?
Excuse me, chairs.
Chairs. 2 or 3.
2 or 3. And so you were in 2 or 3, and then Mr. Olson was 3 or 4 from the aisle.
Okay. Somewhere around, approximately, yes.
Okay, and so you were in that row B that actually has a small step down, correct?
Yes.
In other words, row B sits a little bit lower than row A.
Yes. That movie has steps. It doesn't have just a general decline.
Okay, now, so the trailers are on, they're on loud, you come in and you sit down. And your attention is now focused on what's showing, is that correct?
Correct.
Because you're interested in what those trailers are.
Correct.
So that in the future, if you like something on a trailer, hey, you're going to go to the movies.
Correct.
Correct? And so that's where your focus is at. Now, you've indicated that at some point in time, something drew your attention to Mr. Olson. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And that's where your attention first went, to Mr. Olson that was 3 or 4 seats from you.
Yes.
Now, you were wearing the same glasses that you're wearing today?
No, I was wearing another set of glasses.
Okay. Well, let's talk about it. How many sets of glasses do you have?
4.
You have 4.
They're all the same prescription, though.
Just for style?
Yes.
Okay, so you wear different glasses for your style.
Yes.
Okay, and your left eye, well, let me take, your right eye is 20/20?
This right eye is, no, it's not 20/20.
Okay, well, what's your right eye?
This right eye is 2300.
Okay, and your left eye?
It's 20/20 corrected.
No, I'm talking about before corrected.
2200.
2200. Okay, so your left eye, you said, is 2200 before being corrected. Your right eye is 2300 before being corrected.
No, it's 2040 after correction.
2040 after correction.
Yes.
Okay, I'm glad that we got that straight. And so you sit down with a pair of glasses. Do you know if those were even the glasses you had on?
No, I had a different pair.
Okay, and what caused you to look over to Mr. Olson was that you heard some commotion.
I heard some commotion.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Something on the peripheral.
Okay, and so you looked over there, and what do you see?
I see Olson sitting there, and I see a reflection of a cell phone, with the light still on.
Okay.
And that's when I heard the statement that Olson made, saying, "I just texted my 2-year-old daughter."
Okay. When you heard Mr. Olson saying he had texted his 2-year-old daughter, I would imagine you thought to yourself, texting a 2-year-old? Did you find that to be a peculiar statement?
I think I was presuming he meant the babysitter.
Why were you presuming that he meant the babysitter? Why are you presuming anything?
Well, I was just presuming that that's what he meant.
Okay. And so you didn't hear Mr. Reeves say anything at that point?
I never heard what he said. I know he was talking, but I didn't never hear what he said.
And so if Mr. Reeves was sitting behind Mr. Olson, Mr. Reeves would have been equal distance from you. Correct?
A little bit further back because Olson was in the same row.
You mean the back row?
Correct.
So you know, hearing with the same ear, correct? But you didn't hear any voices at all of Mr. Reeves, did you?
No, I didn't hear what he said. I heard his voice, but I never heard what he said.
Now, you indicated on direct examination that after hearing this voice, you made some opinion that someone had been agitated. Is that correct? You hear the voice. You see Mr. Olson doing anything?
After he said that, he didn't do anything, no.
Was Mr. Olson's body turned around even facing behind him?
No. He
So-
said those words facing the screen.
So at no point in time do you even see Mr. Olson looking back. You see Mr. Olson looking at the trailers just like you are?
I don't know what he was looking at.
Well, but weren't you looking at him?
I was looking, but I don't know what he was looking at.
Was he looking straight ahead at the theater screen?
I don't know what he was looking at.
Well, was he looking forward?
Judge, I'm going to object, ask and answer. He's answered the question at least 2 or 3 times.
Sustained. He did answer the question.
So you believe that Mr. Olson's statement was something dealing with texting. Is that correct?
Correct.
And then what's the next conversation or commotion that you hear from Mr. Olson?
The next time I heard him speak is when Mr. Reeves came back from downstairs.
Okay, we don't go that far. So that's the only statement that you heard.
That's the only statement I heard at that point.
And you, I believe in direct examination, said that at that point in time, you believe that Mr. Reeves got up and left. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And certainly, if Mr. Reeves is complaining that someone is texting, that's the proper course of action. Go tell
Correct.
management, correct?
Correct.
And so you didn't find that odd that Mr. Reeves would go and tell a manager that, hey, they're violating the rules because it's on the screen, you can't text.
At that point, that's correct.
Certainly, you didn't see Mr. Reeves take anything at that moment into his own hands, correct?
No.
And so Mr. Reeves leaves. You're saying he comes back minutes later, correct?
Yes.
But you said in direct examination that as he was leaving, you believed that, number one, he was agitated.
I could hear his voice. It sounded agitated. Sounded like
Okay, let's talk about that. What did you hear Mr. Reeves say?
His exact words I could not understand. I could just say that he was mumbling, and they sounded like he was just distressed and agitated.
What about the, quote, mumble? Did you believe anybody was distressed?
He just sounded like a person. I've heard people before who have been distressed, or they've been agitated, or they've been upset, and they kind of sound like he had that same tone in his voice.
What was it that caused you to believe in that tone? He wasn't screaming, right?
No, he wasn't screaming. Nope.
He wasn't swearing, right?
Nope.
You don't even know what he was saying.
Nope.
But you indicated that the reason that you believed he was agitated was because as he was stumbling down the aisle there, that's what you said, he was stumbling, correct?
Yes.
That he brushed up against your chair, correct?
Correct.
How much do you weigh? I don't want to embarrass you. How much do you weigh?
270. 270 pounds.
270 pounds. And so if you're seated at one of those chairs at the Cobb Theater and you are leaning back, that's quite a bit of weight on that back rest of the seat, correct?
If I was leaning back, I don't remember if I was leaning back. I just know that as he went by, he hit the back of the chair and the back of my head.
But if you were leaning back, that back
Judge,
would
I'm
be...
object to these hypotheticals. If you were leaning back, he already said.
I don't even know if I was leaning back.
Overruled. He can answer the question. He has answered the question. He said he doesn't know if he was leaning back.
I don't know if I was leaning back. The seats go back quite a bit. You can lean back a little bit. You can lean back medium, then the whole
And
way.
if you're leaning
if you're
back-
leaning back the whole way,
Then your back is kind of protruding into the walkway.
Judge, I'm going to object if you were leaning back all the way. He's already indicated he does not recall.
Well,
And he hasn't suggested that he's leaning back, and it's a mischaracterization by Mr. Escobar.
I'll let you clear it up on redirect. Mr. Escobar, though, let's stick to the facts that
I
he's
will.
testified to, not to the
I
hypothetical
will.
facts, okay?
And so that backrest has the opportunity to encroach upon that walkway, correct? And for someone like Mr. Reeves, being 71 years old, it's not odd that he would touch the back of your chair
Judge, that calls for...
as he's leaving, correct?
Sustained.
I did not
Mr.
know you-
Escobar. Sustained. You don't have to answer that question. Do you have any other questions, Mr. Escobar?
Yes, I do.
You may proceed.
So Mr. Reeves leaves, and he comes back. few minutes later. Is that correct?
Yes,
Okay. And when he comes back, he's in his own row.
correct. Yes,
Row A, and he's maneuvering back to his seat with no problem. Correct?
no, he's maneuvering. He did not touch the seat on the way back.
Okay, so he's maneuvering and he sits down. Now, I would imagine you're still looking at the trailers.
Correct.
Now, you're not watching Mr. Reeves as he's coming up the aisle or maneuvering back behind you, correct?
I could see him come up the aisle, but I didn't pay that much attention to him.
Okay, it's because you're looking at the trailers, is that correct?
Yes.
Have the trailers ended by now? Are we starting to get into the movie?
No, we're not.
Okay, so we're still at the trailers.
Correct.
Okay, and so you're still seated with your son watching these trailers.
Correct.
What next causes you to react to Mr. Olson?
There was some conversation between both of those folks.
Well, did you first notice Mr. Olson engaging in conversation?
I didn't know who was speaking, but I know that they were speaking to each other.
Okay. Well, is Mr. Olson's face looking at the screen, or is Mr. Olson's face looking back behind?
He was initially looking at the screen, then he stood up and he turned around and he faced Mr. Reeves.
Okay. So the first time that you see Mr. Olson turn around, is what you're telling this court, is when he stood up and turned around and now was facing Mr. Reeves, correct?
That's the first time I saw him turn around.
Okay. Now, Mr. Olson's a pretty large man, correct?
6'6".
And as you saw him standing up, you could tell, wow, large man, correct?
Yes, he looked very tall.
Okay. And now he has turned his focus at Mr. Reeves, correct?
Correct.
Now, Mr. Olson actually not only stood up, but he came over his own back rest towards Mr. Reeves, correct?
I didn't see that.
Well, were you looking?
I didn't see. I saw him lean a little bit, but I didn't see him come across the
Well,
the
are you
seats.
saying you saw him lean a little bit towards Mr. Reeves?
It seemed like he was leaning as he was talking to Mr. Reeves.
I would imagine you became alarmed at that moment, because why would someone invade that privacy?
It's actually cause for speculation, Judge.
Sustain, just ask the question. You don't need to add all that stuff.
Were you alarmed at that point in time?
No, I became alarmed at when the popcorn flew.
Okay, well, before Mr. Reeves had stood up, you didn't see before Mr. Olson stood up, you didn't see any popcorn in Mr. Olson's hand, did you?
No,
But the only thing that you saw on his person was a phone, correct?
I didn't see him holding the phone, but I had saw the phone earlier when it was sitting on his lap.
Okay.
And I cannot tell you whose popcorn it was.
What color was that phone?
I couldn't tell. The light was on it, but I couldn't tell the color of the phone.
Because it was dark?
No, I just didn't pay attention. The light from the phone was projecting. I couldn't tell if the phone was black or white. I can't tell for sure.
Okay, so now Mr. Olson is upright and he's leaning towards Mr. Reeves. What do you see happen now?
I'd seen some conversation between them, and right after that, I heard saw the flash and heard the gun go off.
Did you hear Mr. Reeves engaging in any conversation at that moment with Mr. Olson?
At that moment, the gun went off.
No. Mr. Olson stands up. He turns around. He's now leaning towards Mr. Reeves. At that moment, did you hear Mr. Reeves engaging in any conversation?
I didn't hear his voice, no.
But you heard Mr. Olson's voice,
I
correct?
heard his voice.
And in your opinion, Mr. Olson was agitated at that point in time, correct?
That is when he became agitated.
And in fact, that's when you got concerned yourself, correct?
Correct.
And you were about to intercede, correct? Because you thought that was bizarre in a movie theater.
Yes, I haven't seen fights in movies since I can remember.
So that was an episode of Mr. Olson that you found to be alarming.
I can't say.
My question is, did you find it to be alarming?
I found it to be alarming. I felt Olson had enough.
You didn't intercede.
No.
And in fact, you're still seated there, and you're looking not back, but you're looking at Mr. Olson, correct?
Yes.
And this is where you indicate that in your peripheral vision, you somehow see popcorn fly. Is that correct?
Yes. A little bit more in peripheral. I turned a little bit to see where the popcorn was going.
Do you know where it was going?
Yes, it was going in the seat. It was going a little bit on Mr. Reeves.
So now what did you do?
Now, we just sat there and I was wondering what's going to happen next.
Okay, well, are you looking at Mr. Olson?
Just peripherally.
Okay, you're looking back at the trailers?
Not really.
Well, what are you looking? If you're not looking at Mr. Olson,
I'm looking
you're
at
not
the-
looking at the trailers, what are you looking
I'm
at?
looking at the trailers, but I'm not taking in what is showing on the screen.
Your face is towards the trailers,
Right.
and you're trying to look through your peripheral vision.
Correct. Because I have my son in the movie, and I don't know where this thing is going.
And you realize that in your peripheral vision, you don't have the benefit of your eyeglass, correct?
Well, yes.
Because now you've got 200 vision from the side of your face, correct?
Yes.
And so you're not able to see anything that's taking place at that point,
No,
correct?
I can see the figures. I can't see them clearly, but I can see them.
You can see the figures.
Yes.
Now, you're telling this court under oath that up until this point in time, you have not heard Mr. Olson raise his voice. Is that what you're telling this court?
Mr. Olson did not raise his voice up until the time he turned around.
You've indicated that Mr. Olson has not cursed.
I did not hear any curse words from either party.
And you don't have any hearing problems, right?
No.
And so now when Mr. Olson is facing Mr. Reeves, are you telling this court that you did not hear Mr. Olson raising his voice?
He did raise his voice. He did say to him, you said something to the theater manager about us or something like that.
He was yelling that, wasn't he?
His voice was up. Yes, it was.
My question is, he was yelling that, was he
I
not?
don't think he yelled at the top of his lungs, but his voice was animated.
And he looked pretty mean, didn't he?
He was a little motivated, yes.
You described him as 6'6", right?
As tall as my son.
So a loud, mean-looking 6'6" person. Right?
Yes.
Still dark?
Same light.
Now, some of that light that we're talking about comes from the screen itself, correct?
Some, yes.
And so if Mr. Olson is standing in front of Mr. Reeves, that screen light is going to be obscured, correct? Because you've got this 6'6" body that's in front of Mr. Reeves. Did you see that?
Could be.
So for Mr. Reeves, it gets a little darker, doesn't it?
Objection, speculation.
Sustained.
Okay, so
Oh, sorry. No, no.
get back to Mr. Olson, 6'6", leaning towards Mr. Reeves. You're looking at the trailers. You're looking through the side of your glasses, correct?
Yes.
Now what happens?
Within a short time, the gun was flashed and there was a gunshot.
You didn't see anybody shooting a gun.
No, I could not see the gun being shot, no.
You just heard a gun.
Bang.
And I believe you indicated that was maybe 30 to 40 seconds after Mr. Olson had gotten up.
It seemed like that, yes.
Okay. Now, when Mr. Olson came down the aisle and fell on your son, that's a pretty traumatic event, correct?
Yes, it was.
It was traumatic for you.
Surprising.
It was traumatic for your son.
Very.
You certainly didn't want your son to have to go through that.
Correct.
And so you were very emotional that day.
Correct.
Now, let's talk a little bit about Mr. Olson's wife. Mr. Olson's wife was seated just on the other seat, furthest away from you, correct?
Correct.
It was Mr. Olson and then his wife.
Correct.
And you remember his wife also getting up, correct?
I saw her, I never saw the entire body of the wife, but I could see her blonde hair either in front of him sometimes or behind him sometimes.
Okay.
But he was big enough to block her body.
Okay. And you saw her actually attempting to restrain him.
She was involved in trying to cool it down, yes.
And the way that she was trying to restrain him is that she had her hand on his chest and was trying to push him away. Correct?
She had her hand up, yes.
And she had her hand on his person and she was trying to push him away.
Objection, ask and answer, Judge.
Correct?
Well,
I don't know if she was trying to...
hold on. This is objection, then we wait until I rule. Yeah, it was asked and answered once. I know. So, ask a new question.
You were at this point extremely alarmed. Correct?
Yes.
Because you were able to see this man's wife trying to restrain him. Correct?
Objection, Judge, ask and answer.
No, overruled.
Correct?
Not extremely alarmed.
Judge, I'm going to object to the mischaracterization of Mr. Escobar in that...
Objections to phrasing? All right. Let him give the facts.
Yeah,
Judge's cross.
I know it is, but still, let him give the facts. All right?
After Mr. Olson was fatally wounded, you witnessed Mrs. Olson, correct?
Yes.
And you witnessed her crying.
Yes.
You were very sympathetic to her.
Yes. I didn't realize she had been shot.
But you talk about in direct examination a statement that you believed my client, Mr. Reeves, said after 30 to 40 seconds after the shot went out, correct?
Yes.
And you're not real sure what that statement was, correct?
Not the entire statement.
And you said in direct examination something to the effect of, do that to my face.
Do that to my face, throw something in my face, something like that.
Why would you just estimate what someone would say in a court of law like this?
That's when there were a lot of voices going off. It was hard to pick out all the particular words at that time because there was some screaming in the movies. There was a lot of people yelling. That was the noisiest part of the entire day.
Didn't you and I and the prosecutor go into a room just a few minutes ago?
Yes.
And didn't we instruct you that when you answered a question, you had to be 100% sure of that answer?
Judge, I'm going to object. Can we approach?
Yeah, approach.
So do that to my face. Correct?
Yes.
Now, you said there was a lot of commotion going on at that same time, a lot of people talking.
Yes, a little bit of screaming, a little bit, yes, but a lot of pandemonium.
Trailers still going?
Judge object, asked and answered.
No,
Trailers are still going?
I believe it was too.
Noise from the trailer?
Yes.
Now, at some point in time, you had an opportunity, did you not, to speak to law enforcement in this case?
That day?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And you had an opportunity, did you not, to not only speak to a law enforcement officer, but you have an opportunity to write your own statement.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Tell the court where it was that you were given this opportunity to sit down and write your own statement.
I think the first time we did it was in a movie theater.
In the movie theater, that's when you wrote down your statement?
Yes.
Okay, and tell me how that was carried out by law enforcement.
They gave us a piece of paper. They said, would you write down what you think you saw here today or you saw? And this was about 10 minutes after they took the body out. So we sat down in the theater.
Who's we?
Everybody, all the people who got the same similar types of piece of paper.
Y'all were grouped in a particular area?
No, they kind of spread out a little bit, but we just sat down and rewrote our statements on those pieces of paper.
I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you what's been marked. May I approach a witness, Your Honor? I'm going to show you what's been marked as Defense Exhibit Number 1 and ask you if you recognize that exhibit.
I do.
Is that a fair and accurate exhibit of your statement that you gave and signed on January the 13th of 2014?
Yeah, I signed this. I did this day, and I did sign it.
That's your own handwriting.
Yes,
That's your signature.
correct.
And there's not been any deletions or subtractions from that. That was the exact copy of the original.
Correct.
Well, I'm going to be
Yes.
asking you some more
Yes.
questions.
Yes.
Okay. Your Honor, at this point in time, the defense would like to move Defense Exhibit Number 1 into evidence.
Do you have any objections coming in as defense exhibit number 1, Mr. Garcia?
It's hearsay, Judge. I know that some hearsay is admissible.
So that's a yes, you do object,
I object, Judge.
based on it being hearsay?
It's his own statement. He's already
I see.
admitted it's his statement.
I understand what you're saying. For purposes of the bond hearing, is there any reason you want me to exclude this other than it's hearsay?
I don't know the relevancy of it, Judge. He hasn't impeached him with it, so why is it being moved in?
I think that's what's coming next. Am I correct in guessing that, Mr. Escobar?
It is, Your Honor.
Well, he hasn't asked anything, so he's moving it in before the impeachment, so
All right, lay the foundation that it's going to be appropriate impeachment before you get into evidence. I'll direct that you may show it to the witness now, even though it's not yet been moved into evidence, and you may question him on it.
Thank you.
Okay?
Mr. Cummings, how many lines do we have in your statement that you wrote out on January the 13th of 2000?
It's about 5 lines.
Okay. You certainly did not put in that statement much of what you've talked about here today, correct?
Correct. I don't do this every day, so I didn't know exactly to what extent you complete these.
Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about that. And I'll hold this here so that the court can see it as well. Now, it starts off by saying, I am writing this
Judge
statement.
object, the document speaks for itself.
Okay.
It's a crossing that's...
Is there, tell me about the impeachment. Are you saying there's a prior inconsistent statement with it?
I'm saying that in this particular version, it is directly opposite to much of what he said.
That's directly opposite to what he said? Let me say it again.
Judge, there's a line of cases on negative impeachment. If the court needs it, I can get it.
I'm familiar with the line of cases on negative impeachment, and at trial, that certainly would be something that I would be willing to consider. This is still a bond hearing. There's still no jury. I'll let him impeach with it if he believes it's impeachment. But don't take liberties with what's written in there. What's written in there is what's written in there. All right, let's go with that.
Mr. Cummings, would you please read what you wrote down on January the 13th of 2014?
At Movies, old man went to complain to management about man on phone. Old man came back alone. He got into an argument with man sitting next to me. Man sitting next to me got up and confronted old man. Old man shot him in the chest.
And how many lines would you say you left completely blank on that statement form? You can count them.
Well, there's a number of things
Completely blank. Objectives involved, Judge.
How many?
Hold on. Overruled as irrelevancy. It's a simple question. Now, how many lines are on that?
There's 5 lines on here.
No, how many lines did you fill in?
Well, I could have written a lot more had I known what I was. I didn't know I needed to complete for this an entire statement that would be appearing here. What I thought was I was giving the sheriff's department a general view of what happened.
Judge, he's not being responsive to my question. How many lines?
Judge, I object. He is being responsive to the question. He's trying to answer Mr. Escobar's question.
Actually, Mr. Escobar is correct. He didn't answer the question. The question is just how many lines did you leave blank? So how many lines?
Oh, how many? Oh, these actual lines. Excuse me.
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry.
Right, not a problem.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8.
There you go.
You want to count that again? It's much more than 8, correct?
Object, Judge.
Sustained. He gets to go with the answer he wants.
No further questions.
Okay. Do you have any further questions for this
Just
witness,
briefly,
Mr.
Judge.
Garcia?
Mr. Cummings, were you not interviewed by Detective James Garapi of the Pasco County Sheriff's Office?
That day?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
And did you not give him a complete version of everything that you testified to here in court today?
Yes.
All of your testimony?
Yes.
In reference to this statement that you gave, what was your understanding of this statement?
It's just that we were an eyewitness to a crime. I didn't, and I didn't know it was to be filled out in great detail, line by line, minute by minute, activity by activity. I did not know that.
Okay.
And it wasn't explained like that. We were in a movie theater that still had some lighting problems. Again, I've never done one of these before, so I wasn't quite sure exactly what you're supposed to do in total.
But
Had I done that, I would have taken a little more time to do it.
But you did tell Detective James Garapi in total everything that was said here today and that you
Yes,
testified to.
it was much easier to talk. I still had a lot of blood on my hands when I wrote this. It was drying at the time. So it was still a little traumatic in writing it.
Yes, sir. May I have a moment, Judge?
You may.
I think when you were being cross-examined by Mr. Escobar, you had indicated that at some point in time, Mr. Olson had had enough. Do you
Yes.
remember making that statement?
Yes.
What did you mean by that?
I just think that whatever the conversations were going back and forth between those two, he probably had enough. He didn't want to be he wanted to stop it. And I think when they
I'm going to
stated,
object at this point. I think it's totally speculative what he's testifying about. There's no proper predicate for this opinion.
Judge, he-
Overruled. You open the door to it. You may continue, Mr. Garcia. But wrap it up.
I am, Judge. I was just trying to allow him to finish his his answer. I'm sorry, Mr. Cummings.
I just felt that the give and take and the back and forth, he probably had it, you know, I just, you know, I'm not texting anymore, leave me alone. And I did not see him text anymore from the time that the comment was made. I was just texting my 2-year-old daughter or something. I did not see any more texts after that.
Thank you, Mr. Cummings.
I think it was from something, I don't know everything, but I did not see any more texts.
Thank you, sir. I have no further questions.
Just one for Your Honor. Just a couple of questions concerning your interview. You indicated to the prosecution that you were questioned by a law enforcement officer. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And that was Officer Garapi. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And when he questioned you and your son together, correct?
Yes, sir.
No further questions.
He did talk to us
He
individually.
doesn't have any other questions. It's okay.
Oh,
All right, great. Thank you for coming in today, sir. All right, you're excused. You know, could I have that back, though, that one? Thanks. Never actually got admitted. You still wish to have it admitted?
I do, Your
You
Honor.
read it.
I do, Your
You
Honor.
need it admitted?
I do.
State, it's been read. Do you have any objection to it being admitted at this point?
Again, Judge, I don't know the relevancy of it. He has not been impeached with it. He admitted that it was his writing.
Overruled. I'll admit it for the limited purpose of this bond hearing. Okay. All right. State, who's going to call as your next witness?
Judge, the next witness is going to be probably rather long. I don't know.
Define rather long.
Well, it's going to be more, I think you've been trying to take breaks every,
I have, and we've now
10
gone
minutes or so?
58 minutes, yes.
so we're getting close to that time period. It's going to go past the time that you would normally take your break.
Let's take a 10-minute recess,
That's
though.
fine.
Although when I say 10 minutes this
Yes,
time, I actually mean at 4:12, we're going to start again,
Yes, sir.
okay? So, till 4:12, we're going to recess.